Good morning, everybody. Welcome, everybody. We're honored and fortunate to have a guest speaker with us today by the name of Diane Deerheart Raymond, who is clan mother of the Nipmuck Chaugunagungamaug tribe, who live on what lake? What lake is it? Come on, can anybody tell me what's the name of this lake?
Get extra credit.
Bonus. And that would be Lake Chaugunagungamaug, Chaugunagungamaug. Deerheart, can you say it properly?
That is correct, what you said, Lake Chaugunagungamaug, Chaugunagungamaug.
Perfect. Okay. Well, with that said, I'm going to turn the time over to Deerheart and get out of her way. Let's put it right there.
Sounds good. Okay. Again, so as he said, my name is Deerheart. Atakwata is how you say it in Algonquin. And I am from the Chaugunagungamaug faction of Nipmucks. There originally was 13 villages. There's really 2 that exist today. The Hassanamisit and the Chaugunagungamaug faction. And they work together in a lot of ways, but they are 2 separate entities. So Chaugunagungamaug comes from the name of the lake, Chaugunagungamaug, Chaugunagungamaug. Has anyone heard of what the interpretation of that was and can tell me? No? So the loose interpretation of that is, I fish on my side, you fish on your side, and nobody fishes in the middle. Now, that's a real loose interpretation, because if you really start to learn Algonquin language, man is short for Manitou, which is creator. And in the middle of that name of that lake, Chaugunagungamaug, Manchaugunagug, that's God, that's creator. So the Algonquin interpretation of Lake Chaugunagungamaug, Manchaugunagug, Chaugunagungamaug is, you fish on your side, I fish on my side, and the middle's for the creator. So I think that's kind of an important thing that you shouldn't be leaving out, So, but that was a loose interpretation of what the lake means, Webster Lake. You guys are probably only an hour away from Webster Lake, right here. So I know you're all looking at me and you're saying, okay, she has blonde hair and green eyes, and she's very fair-skinned. Really, is this lady Native American? Is she Indian? Well, this was the first area where the settlers came. They all kind of came along the East Coast. So a lot of us look like this. We're very mixed. My mom was Native American, as you saw in the video. And my dad was a full-blooded, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Swede. So I think most of us took on the attributes, me and my siblings, of my Swedish dad. But I like to say I'm white on the outside, but I'm Native on the inside. So that's kind of how I run my life. My grandpa was the chief of the tribe. He was Chief Wise Owl. He was in the documentary, I'm sure you saw. And my mom was Clanmother, Loving One. So I grew up always knowing that half of the blood that ran through my veins was of Native descent. But I'd have to say the majority of my teachings were really based on Native thoughts, Native beliefs, Native culture. One of the biggest things that my mother taught me was the one commandment that Native Americans have, and that is the commandment of respect. So if you respect yourself and you respect others, and you respect the world around you, there's really no need for lots of other commandments. You're not going to break those other commandments that you might have heard in other religions. So that's really the one commandment. Respect yourself, respect others, and respect the world around you. And some of you have seen the video, and we used our hand, and the hand told the story of our Bible. This was our Bible, our hand. So my mother used to say, take your hand and you put it up. And this pinky represents you when you're a child. You're small, you're little, kind of hanging on the end. Can't really do much else without the rest of the hand and the fingers. So that represents you as a child. And then this ring finger, a little taller, a little stronger, but still kind of useless on your own. You really need the rest of the hand and the fingers to help with whatever you're going to do. And this represents your parents, the middle finger. Don't get sassy with that. But that's when you're strongest and you're wisest and you're taking care of your family and you're tall and strong. So that represents you as an adult. And then the Indians, even before they knew about arthritis and synovial joint fluid and all those problems that you get as you get older, before you shrink up a little bit, get a little kyphotic, crunched over, they realize that the elder shrinks a little, gets a little smaller. So the pointer finger represents you as an elder. And the wonderful thing about our community is we revere the elders in our community because they're wise and they've lived life and they've learned a thing or two. And the elder is closest to God. So the thumb represents God, Creator, whatever you call your higher power. You can't do much else with your hand without that thumb, or it's very difficult without it. So that's the story of our Bible, of our believing in a higher power and how our higher power helps us in all phases of our life. We don't have books. We weren't, didn't have a lot of books and things teaching us, but these stories were brought down via oral traditions. We were always taught to honor the elders because they were the link to the past. And in the same sense, you honor your children because they're the link to the future. These kind of lessons were brought about with oral histories through my childhood. I can remember my grandpa and grandma sitting us down at the fire on a winter night, and they would just tell us these legends. One of them was, he called it the blanket story, and it speaks to this honoring your past and your present through your elders and your children. And it was this gentleman was married and he had a few kids, and his elderly father had moved in with him. And the elderly father was kind of getting underfoot. So Mom was getting irritated. She had to take care of the children. She had to take care of the husband and the household and the cooking. And she finally spoke to her husband and said, listen, it's me or him. I can't do this. He's underfoot all the time. He's in the way. And he didn't want to lose his wife. And he was trying to think of the family. So he pulled his oldest son aside and he said, I need you to take this blanket and take Grandpa and you walk him into the deepest part of the woods and you leave him there. And you put this blanket around his shoulders and you run back to the village as fast as you can. So the boy was heartbroken. He loved his grandpa, but he knew he had to obey what his parents wanted. So he walked with his grandpa into the deepest part of the woods, and all the way there his heart is breaking and he's crying because Grandpa's talking about, remember that time when we caught that fish with that hook that I made for you and we sharpened? And remember that time when we went camping out in the woods and we were there all weekend and it rained? And he kept bringing up all of these memories, and the boy was just heartbroken. They get to a log in the woods. He sits Grandpa down and he rips the blanket in half and he puts half on the Grandpa's shoulders and he runs back to the village as fast as he can. As Dad sees him coming closer to the village, he sees he has the blanket in his hand and he says, I told you to leave the blanket with Grandpa. Why do you have it? Didn't you listen to what I said? And the boy looked up at his father and said, this half is for you. And the story goes on to talk about how that gave the parents' perspective as to the elders' importance in their life. After the son kind of brought it home for him about, you're going to be at this place at one time in your life. And the story goes how he had gone back into the woods and they got the grandpa and they kind of figured out life with Grandpa there in his stories. But that was a story about talking about how important it was linking the past, to the future. Of course, we were just crying when we were kids. What are they doing with Grandpa? But it's a story that, brings attention to it. So one thing I loved about my culture is that we were always taught to tread softly on Mother Earth. You look in the history books and it's always about, trampling and conquering different parcels of land, and this part is mine and this part. But we were always taught that Mother Earth is here and we're supposed to honor her and treat her well because she provides all that we need. We've had elderly aunts that have passed away that would, grow medicinal salves. They would make salves. They would take plants. They would grow plants, and they would use a lot of this stuff. I remember my grandfather having a migraine one time, and my grandmother took a bandana, sliced up a potato, lined it in the bandana, salted and peppered it, and put it on his head. And within an hour, his migraine was gone, and the potatoes were like cooked. And it was just an old fat. I know it's crazy. They used to put certain little medicine bags on the chest of babies when they were cold, and it would have certain herbs and things like that. So, I mean, it's not that we didn't use, we go to the hospital when we need to, but there was always, especially for the less serious things that were going on medically with the family, there would be aunts and medicine men that would have these little medicinal practices. So I kind of grew up in a dual kind of sense, two kind of road. I say the white road and the red road. And I actually work in healthcare. But I also, when I need to, I look to my culture for those little things that I used to witness when I grew up. I'm getting old. I can't see as well as I used to, so excuse me. A lot of times we look at heroes in the American society as the ones who maybe, as soldiers, or maybe people that have had to do things and kill people. And when we grew up in our culture, we never marveled at the one that killed. We were always marveling at the one who was healing people. So we had people in the tribe that were not only, physical healers, but spiritual and emotional, that you would consult when something would happen. And even if you were going through something physical, they might not be able to heal a cancer that you have, but because they were the ones that, had spiritual upbringing or that's something, we would always, use them. And as we get older, it's more we're using American medicine as well as our native medicine to treat our ailments. The best part was, when I grew up in my little town, I remember little kids, I'm praying that I get such and such for Christmas, and I'm praying that I do this. And that was a foreign concept to me, because when we grew up, we never prayed for things we wanted. It was always the most powerful prayer that we had was praying and being grateful for what we had. Oh my God, thank you for this beautiful day. Oh, this is a terrific meal that my mom made. Oh my God, I'm so lucky I have siblings to help me to play with and to do stuff. So it was like the prayer seemed different than what American society, what I was learning from my American friends, We were always, and I think a lot of times, and I don't know if this, someone asked me one time, well, do you believe in many gods? Is that what? And I says, no, I believe in one creator. I realize different religions have different names for that one source we're talking about, but I believe in one creator. But because a lot of times we were praying, oh, thank you for the beautiful sun. Thank you for the beautiful wind. I think sometimes that got lost in interpretation sometime, and people were saying, oh, you're thinking the wind god and the sun god and that sort of thing. And I had to explain, no, a lot of times at ceremony, we thank for the beautiful sun. We had pouring rain one time at the reservation. I remember Kenny, one of the elders in the tribe, saying, thank you, Creator, for this cleansing rain. And some people were freezing under the umbrellas, and to be grateful for the cleansing rain. It's about the mindset and being thankful for the things that you can bear witness to and you can appreciate. It's really, an affirmation of gratitude for what you can experience. So I always get the question, did you grow up on the reservation? Did you go to Indian schools? I grew up just like you did, as far as living in the house with an American the nuclear family. I went to schools. We did have a reservation, and for those of you that have seen the movie, that reservation was really utilized for ceremony. So we did have people that stayed up there from time to time. But typically, I went to the same kind of schools you did. I went to reservation, kind of like you would go to church. Reservation was for prayer, was for ceremony, was for meeting with family and friends. That's kind of where my worlds were. The major difference about you guys and probably my upbringing was that we had native customs that we practiced. So church was our outdoors, and that was kind of where we would be most prayerful, was when we were outside in ceremony, and usually in a circle. That's why I love Dr. Jarvis. He always tries to get kind of a circle, because we did everything in circles. It's a feeling of there's not just one person who's the teacher, or the one that everybody has, the pastor, or the one that everybody has to listen to. I think, from the elder, and I'm going to say you're the elder here because you really are, down to you guys and to little kids. Everybody in a circle has something to add. And sometimes I swear that from the mouths of babes, they give the most poignant viewpoint, give you the best perspective, So being in a circle, kind of puts everybody on equal playing ground. So I love that Dr. Jarvis does his what he can for classes in a circle. I told you my other life is I work in healthcare. So sometimes I do presentations about natives in the hospital or in the nursing homes, which we don't see. I've been in healthcare for 30-something years, and I haven't seen any natives, because I think with this society, we're all busy, we're working, right? Grandma and grandpa getting old, we got to put them in a nursing home. We can't watch them. We can't stay home to watch them. With Native Americans, they take care of their elders, and it's always probably not put on one person, so it's not as difficult, but they don't consider it a bother to take care of the elder. It's considered an honor to have the elder in your house. And yes, I have seen an elder move from home to home, maybe because somebody has to work or whatnot, but I haven't seen a lot of Native Americans in nursing homes because of that. They're usually with their family, the extended family. I brought a couple things. You can look around the room just so you guys could have some things to look at. We got our dream catcher up here. I have a piece of sweet grass over there. There's some things on the back table. I bring the wedding vase just because that's what my mother gave that to me and my husband at our wedding. And there's some books and some jewelry that my mother had given me, some pictures of her. She was really, you want to see a nice looking Indian. That's my mom over there. So her pictures are over there on postcards. But I bring that so you guys can just kind of look and have something tangible. But I brought the sweet grass and the smudge because I'm going to liken that to incense in a church. So when we light the smudge or the sweet grass before we have ceremony, it's typically before we go into a circle. And it's really not so much about, lighting it up and getting it burning so much as it is about taking the few minutes it takes to light it and to kind of bring the smoke over your body and getting a good mindset. It's really a meditative practice. So before you go into the circle into ceremony, it's not good to go in with harsh feelings and negative vibes. So it's really about getting in a good mindset so that you can be open to receive the messages in the circle that day. So it's about stopping at the front of the circle. There's usually a medicine man there, and he has the smudge going, and you kind of bring the smoke around your body, and you take deep breaths. And as we know now in meditative practices, deep breaths and all that is very good for, our soul, right? Our spirit. So Smudging is very crucial to a lot of our practices before we go into ceremony. If we're having a bad day, I know even sometimes I just feel nervous being in the house by myself. I light a little smudge and take some deep breaths and I feel better. So it's really, that's what I kind of liken it to, incense in a church. Speaking of church, I think it's a funny story I like to share because we never went to a building to go to church. So when I was a lot younger, my first instance in a church, I don't know if it was a baptism or something a friend of a family was having, and we were invited to this. So everybody's in the church. We all come in, and me and my family, and we're walking in, and I had never been in a church before. So they all took the back pews, and, I'm watching everybody because I'm in the back pew with my family in the front. And when it comes time to pray, everybody gets down on their pews and bows their head. And my family, I realize now why they took the back pews. We pray standing up, opening our arms and facing the Creator. So it must have been, a sight for the pastor that day to see all these Indian folks in the back pews standing up and putting their arms up to Creator, because that's the way that we pray. So that's one of my very first memories of church as a child. Another thing with our Algonquin, our Nipmuck tribes, I don't know how many of you have heard of sweat lodges. Has anybody heard of sweat lodges and that practice? So the good thing, sweat lodges are usually rounded structures, and they heat stones up and pour hot water on, so it again creates that smoke. And that smoke, with all the men in the sweat lodge, they pray, they have discussions, and then it's believed that the smoke carries their prayers to the Creator. Now, a lot of times me and Dr. Jarvis were teaching to women-only classes, and we talk about with women, they don't need to do sweat lodges because they're considered to have their own kind of purification ceremony that when they have their menses. So that's considered a woman's purification time. And I've heard stories from my ancestors that during wouldn't this be lovely, ladies, right? During our menses, we get to go take a nap. We get to spend some time alone. We get to be by ourselves. That was our purification time. It was equated with the men's sweat lodge time. And that was part of the power of having a community with you, so that when you were on your menses and you were having your purification time, maybe other females in the village, your aunts, your cousins would help with your children, would help, make a meal for your husband, might help do other things. So I think we should go back to that. What do you think, right? Wouldn't that be great? That would be our time for reflection, a time for ourselves. We're taking care of the whole world otherwise, right? So I think we should go back to that. I keep trying to vote it in, but it's not. I'm against a lot of men, so no, just teasing. But women were respected and honored and revered for their life-bearing capabilities. I like for Dr. Jarvis to reiterate a little bit on that, because I know we've always been really revved up about the matriarchal societies that are really stem from this area. There was a lot of Indian tribes in the area, not just Nipmucks. There was a lot in this area that talk about, women being, and he talks about that in his classes, about how you didn't see a lot of rape, a lot of crimes against women, because they were revered as the life bearers, I particularly remember one story you talked about in class about this book that we read about. If you could talk a little bit about that, because that inspired me. That book that when they kind of captured the families and it came time to bring the families back. Do you remember a little bit of that?
Yeah, tying it to the female.
Yes, and how they really wanted to hang with the Indians. So.
It's actually a very true story. There's a couple of big books about it. A true story happened right on the other side of Enfield, Connecticut, in Longmeadow, Massachusetts. In 1704, there was a Native American raid of Deerfield, Massachusetts, and they ran off with over 120 people, children and adults. And over the next 5 years, the whites negotiated to get the hostages back. Remember, Pocahontas was a hostage, and the next reading we're going to do is a hostage. There's a lot of hostage taking. Well, the Indians didn't kill their hostages, and they didn't sell them into slavery. And they had this boy and girl hostage from the same family. It just happened to be the Reverend Williams of Longmeadow, Massachusetts. And it was Eunice and Stephen. And the Indians had Eunice and they had Stephen. Well, they quickly decided they would give Stephen back. Mr. Williams, you can have your son back. He's a bad Indian. He doesn't like to work. He likes to sleep in the morning. He doesn't help the old people. You can have it. But we're going to keep Eunice. We love Eunice. And Eunice says, oh, and the thing that the whole big book I'm reading right now is about Eunice flatly refused to come home to the white family because she, after a year with the Indians, was like, Puritan families, think what it meant to be raised in a Puritan family. Church on Sunday, 6 hours on wooden pews, and you're 6 years old, not cheerful. Anyway, Eunice refused to come home, and spent the rest of her life. She married an Indian young man. They had a family. They came back periodically to Longmeadow, Massachusetts for her whole life to visit her brother. They would camp out on the village green beside his big white, he was one of the leading citizens of Longmeadow, so he lived in a big, huge colonial white house, and he was like, come in and sleep in a bed. No, that's too easy. We're sleeping on the ground close to Mother Earth. Indian said, that's right. We're keeping this girl. She got the right stuff, and indeed, she became a white Indian, which we're going to read about in the next sequence of things we do. Some more stuff that may have not been in your high school history text, but we're not talking about that now because we have a history text right here in living form.
And I'll be honest with you, the history aspect of is not my favorite part because of all the harshness that came from it. I told Dr. Jarvis, I've kind of stepped out of the political arena and fighting with federal recognition, for federal recognition and all this, because this is the stuff that speaks to my heart, is this, the spiritual road, the red road, and a lot of times the history is a little sad, to hear. And so I tend to go more down this avenue when I talk to you guys, because this is where my passion is at. But I love the fact that we come, this area, matriarchal is matriarchal. I love that. I mean, my mother told me that how they used to do divorces, because realize that we all grow and we change. They were way ahead of, a Puritan society, whereas, okay, sometimes you outgrow a partner. That's normal. So they used to take their moccasins and put it outside the wetu, and then when the man came home, he had to pick up his moccasins and go. No questions asked. Woman decided that was the wedding, that the marriage was over with. And my mother used to kind of always tease my father about that. Oh, your moccasins will be outside. Your moccasins will be outside, if you do that or whatnot. But it just goes to show you how women were revered in the society. Now,
I have a story to add in there.
Please do.
I asked Loving one time, so when he comes back, you have all of his stuff outside the wetu, the wigwam. You got all of his stuff out there, and he just takes it and leaves. She says, no, he doesn't get all of his stuff. He gets his moccasins. I might give him a blanket to keep him warm, but the rest stuff I'm keeping. I need that stuff. I got kids here to take care of. So in a matriarchal culture, that woman had the power to decide, we're having a divorce, and guess what? I get to decide what you get because I got some responsibilities here. Unlike a courtroom today where, goes on for a year while they divide property and everybody gets exactly an equal share. They didn't get equal shares. The woman got what she wanted and needed.
Right. But in the same way, you had said, you don't see a lot of violence against women. You don't see, you didn't see that in that culture. I really think that when the settlers came over, if they, rather than trying to snuff the native culture out, and they would have embraced it, we would have been voting rights. We would have been voting a lot earlier in this country because women, as I said, were revered as being bearers of life, important members of society. So just my soapbox on that. So, as I said, we love gathering in circles, and I don't know if he has instituted the talking stick yet in your classrooms. You have? Have you seen that? And what was terrific about that? How many times have you gone to a family reunion or something? You always got that one loud uncle or whatever. Somebody's always taking the reins and kind of being the big mouth, you know? With that talking stick, oh, you even have it with you. Lovely. We'll pass it around at the end in case anybody has any questions or comments. I particularly love the talking stick theory during the political meetings when we are meeting for federal recognition, because you always got somebody who feels very strongly about the white government, somebody else who's maybe not feeling as strongly. So with the talking stick, nobody gets to interrupt each other, you know? And I think that is so important because the quieter people or the more introverted people in your life, in a tribe, sometimes get squelched a little bit, right? Because they don't have the loudest voice, you know? And sometimes they have the most poignant points. So with the talking stick, you have the talking stick. I'm not allowed to talk or interrupt you. You finish what you're saying, you know? And I just think it's one of those things that validate that commandment of respect that we have. What you have to say and what you have to say is just important, what we have to say. So talking stick, and I used to try to do it with my kid when she was little. Okay, you got the stick. You tell mommy how you feel and I won't talk. It's hard sometimes to not interrupt, right? But it gave her that empower. You know, she felt empowered that, okay, she had the stick. She could say exactly how she felt. So, we would use that a lot as well. Everybody's a teacher, so it's important to hear that. So the things that maybe were different rather than with us moon ceremonies. So we have powwows and we have moon ceremonies. And actually, we usually have our powwow in September. And of course, this year and last year, we weren't able to have it because of COVID. So the big difference between powwows and moon ceremonies. Powwows are like a party, okay? We're having a big party. You're going to dance. You're going to sing. You're going to hear the drumming. You're going to have leather goods for sale. You're going to have buffalo burgers and venison chili that you can buy. You're going to meet all friends and families from all different tribes. Okay, so that's a powwow. A lot of fun. Go if you can go. Sometimes it's a good time. Moon ceremonies. Now that's a little bit more intimate. We don't exchange money at moon ceremonies. Moon ceremonies are done on the reservation or in somebody's backyard. And we kind of celebrate them like you celebrate holidays. So Christmas, Easter, 4th of July, those are the big ones, right? Those are your big holidays. We have like changing of the season holidays is what we usually celebrate. So this early spring, we'll stop there. That is the melting moon. Makes sense, right? That's when snow's melting. You're starting to see the little buds on the trees. This is a perfect time to all come together for melting moon because it's starting to get nice out. You've all been kind of tucked away in your little weetus for all winter. Time to come together and celebrate melting moon. So that we celebrate in the early spring. Then in the late spring, we celebrate Chaugunagungamaug, which is our New Year moon. A lot of times we celebrate with planting a tree or planting some vegetables. Think about that. Doesn't that make a lot of sense to have the New Year moon in the beginning of spring rather than the dead of winter, January 1st, when it's still snowing, you know? So we celebrate our New Year, beginning as late spring, I would say. We start to plant everything. I remember I was speaking one time at the reservation at one of our moon ceremonies, and I was talking about the planting moon, New Year moon, kind of Chaugunagungamaug, we call it all those things. And I was talking about how my mom teaches the granddaughters to plant in the spring. And one of the hardest things, though, is when we get that first vegetable up from the garden, a tomato. It's usually a tomato that comes up first. But you know how you get all excited? I don't know how many of you have the gardens, and that first tomato pops up, and I'm going to slice that up and put some pepper on. But my mother always said the first fruit goes back to the Creator. So the girls learned that the first tomato or the first vegetable from their garden, again, a practice in gratitude, thank you, Creator, for the harvest we're going to receive. And I was telling that story one time at the reservation, and there was a photographer there, and he wanted to capture that picture. So he actually had come to my house with my mother and her two granddaughters, and they sat on the ground, and my mother was digging with an old stone and planting the tomato back in with the two girls in the background. And then that portrait is in a museum in Boston, because he loved the story of being grateful for something. Now, this was the first fruit being buried back in, and they had to hold off their gratification and just be in the moment and be grateful for the harvest that was coming. I think that's a great lesson. I think sometime in American society, it's just give me this now, right now, gratify, what I mean? But to be able to delay gratification and to be grateful in the moment, I think these are lessons we should be teaching our kids. I think they're good lessons. My favorite ceremony, and I'm going to share with you my story a little bit later on, but it is called the one of Strawberry Moon. Now, you guys probably saw some of that on the documentary if you've watched it already, but this is the moon of forgiveness. And as a child, I just did not understand the power there is in forgiveness. So we heard the story of the Strawberry Moon legend of the quarreling brother and sister. You guys probably heard it on the film, and how they had walked down the path and they were angry at each other. The mother made them go on and take some time to reflect upon their argument and their pettiness, And as they walked down and discovered all of the different berries along the path, it made them kind of miss their sibling. And they could, get past the pettiness and return back to each other, forgive each other for their fighting. And so we always learned that story. My mother would bring that up. Oh, remember the brother and the sister that were fighting and they got together, But little did I know that the whole power of forgiveness would really come into play in my life in so many ways, and how that would be so powerful a lesson for me. So as I got a little bit older, that was kind of the story that was the powerful one for me. Now, this time of year, this is considered harvest moon. How many have you seen on TV? Oh, the full harvest moon, right? So big harvest moon. Now, this was the time. This is also a great lesson. Talking about community. So we would come to the reservation for our harvest moon ceremony, and everybody would bring something. Now, in old days, it would be people would bring the stuff they grew from their gardens, the excess they had at the end of the year. They'd take what they have, canned it, put it away. Whatever they had excess, they would bring. Now it's a more modern version. So when Harvest Moon happens now, maybe you had a really good garden, so you brought extra tomatoes. And you had a really good garden, you had corn. And then someone else can't grow a garden anymore. So she quilts blankets. So she might bring some blankets she quilted over the winter months. And then someone else canned all their vegetables. They bring some canned vegetables. I've seen people bring clothes that they've outgrown, shoes that don't fit them anymore. So in the middle of our Harvest Moon ceremony, we literally have a pile of stuff from the community. So you leave something and then you bring something home with you. So we're all bringing a little piece of each other home with us as well. It's a great lesson, rather than in this throwaway society we have. This is about recycling and everything be used again, and then taking a little piece of each other home with each other. I just think it's a great way to live, And then there's the story of Nipmuck, which I really want Dr. Jarvis to talk on as well, because him and his daughter have participated in Nipmuck ceremony. Now, Nipmuck is our Christmas spirit. It was a legend of a spirit that lived in the woods, and his name was Nipmuck. And he would lead the hunters to where the game was, where the food was. So this was a legend that we had learned as children. And they were able to provide for their families for the winter because of this little spirit of giving. So when we have a Christmas ceremony, a Nipmuck ceremony, we don't have a big Santa Claus in the corner that has a big bag of gifts that is passing it out to gifts to everybody. What we have is a gathering where we all meet, we drum, we sing, and we have a potluck, and we have a great time. But the children bring gifts for less fortunate people in the tribe. Now, isn't that what we're trying to teach our kids? That spirit of giving, rather than being, oh, what am I going to get, out of that bag? The kids light up in a way by bringing something into the circle and giving it to the elders so the elders can give it to other children in the tribe that are less fortunate. Isn't that what we should be teaching our kids? I think it's a great lesson. And I'm going to have him come over, and I want him to talk about Story and his daughter.
Okay, I have a story for you. It was a busy day on campus that day. It was December, the first week of December, and I knew I promised my Pascal, who was 5 years old, I said, baby, we're going to an Indian Christmas tonight. It starts at 6 o'clock. We got to get there by 6. I get out of campus, it's 5 o'clock. Oh my God, I've been so busy, I forgot to get a gift. Because my little Pascal needs to take a gift, because that's what the Indians do. So I roar home, Pascal jumps in, still in a car seat in those days, and I say, baby, we need a gift, and you got to pick it out. I don't know what a little person would want, but you got to pick a gift for some little Indian child, and we're going to CVS, because we're in a hurry. Well, CVS did have a good collection of gifts. I was a little troubled by that, because my 5-year-old was taking this more seriously than you might believe. It's like, what? Don't I get a gift? Isn't Santa coming to this? Doesn't Santa love the Indians? I say, well, Santa loves the Indians, but the Indians love each other, and there's some little Indian children that might not get a gift this year unless you bring one. Really? Wait, I'll get a little girl gift. And we're now driving to CVS. I said, yeah, get a little girl gift. That's perfect. Oh, My Little Pony. And she's back there starting a list. Oh my God. So we get to CVS, and Dad's like, she's like, oh. And so she's going on like this for a long time. We finally get the gift. We buy a gift bag because we're mainstream whites entering an Indian world. We don't got no time for this wrapping the pretty gift. So we got a nice gift bag, put it in, jump back in the car, seat belt cinched, and we're roaring to 35 miles over to Deerheart and to the powwow. All the way over, my little 5-year-old. Dad, maybe I should have got a brown My Little Pony. I got a pink one. I'm like, it's for a little girl, honey. The brown one was for a little boy. Oh, yeah. I should have got the little pony with the longer hair. Magic is starting to happen. It gets better. So we get to the powwow, and we all she takes her gift proudly up to the blanket, puts it on, and I take all the gifts and put them over in the corner, and there's a big pile of gifts, and she's like, Dad, look, all the Indian children, they're going to get a good gift. And I'm like, yeah, thank you. You gave. So we ate. It was a great evening. We got in the car at the end of the evening. We're driving home. I swear, all the way home, my 5-year-old's back there with the true Christmas spirit at 5, saying, oh, Daddy, do you think she'll open it in the morning? Or do you think she'll open it tonight? I said morning, was I right?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
She says, oh, I wonder what her eyes will look like when she opens it. Oh, I wonder if she'll play with it in the snow or stay in the... And that, my friends, was one of the best Christmases. As soon as I say to Pascal now, who's 24, I say, Pascal, remember that Nipmuck Christmas? Oh, that was good. Remember that, Dad, that pink little pony? I should have got the brown one. the end.
But the point is, I think it's a great lesson. This is the lessons I think we need to be giving our kids, need to be giving our children. we're always taught, if you're blessed, right, with a full cup, you got a full cup, you got great family, you got friends, you got a job, you're getting educated, you know, you got siblings, you got friends, you got your health. It's your responsibility to pour a little bit out of that cup. Share it with somebody else. Give something to somebody else that doesn't have what you have. And that's twofold. You give it, you're helping someone else up, and then you're emptying your cup a little to receive a little bit something else that you're supposed to receive. So that's just what we've always taught our kids, taught them that's the way to live. It's the way to be. It's the way to be a good, not Indian, it's the way to be a good human. You know, it's a good way to live. Speaking of living, another question I get a lot is all the time is, did you live in a house, or did you live in a teepee, or did you live in a wetu? What's the story, you know? So this area tended to have more wetus. And let me tell you why. Teepees are kind of what you see on westerns and that sort of thing. And it's not like we didn't have teepees around here. But teepees were more like setting up a tent when you go camping. It was more of a temporary structure. So around here in New England, it gets cold in the wintertime. So we need structures that are a lot warmer than what a teepee can provide. So the wetus are more rounded structures, and they would put skins on there, or, you know, more modern versions. Now we have tarps, we have different things that we use. A fire in the middle, again, with the hole on the top so the smoke can go to the creator. Another thing we lived in out here was longhouses. And again, this speaks to not only the structure physically to handle the New England weather, but a lot of times we were living intergenerationally. And what I mean by that is, you know, you usually live in your little nuclear family, mom, dad, brothers and sisters in one family. But a lot of our families lived intergenerationally. Grandma, aunts, uncles, cousins, a lot of people would live with you. And that provided a lot of, you know, how many times do we hear, you know, it takes a village, right, to raise a child. And that's exactly what would happen. So when mom was having her purification time, or dad was at sweat lodge or out hunting, we had cousins, we had aunts, we had grandparents who would pick up the slack of the household duties and taking care of the kids. Now, it's so funny. I remember one time as a child, and this is more of a modern version of the longhouse, but we actually had an apartment building where my grandparents were on the bottom, my nuclear family was on the middle floor, and my aunt and her family and all my cousins were upstairs. And it was very comfortable for us because it was kind of something we have always been used to, always living intergenerationally. Now, you never know where you'd find your kid. Could be at grandpa's, could be at cousins. You never knew where you were having dinner. Sometimes grandma was making it, sometimes auntie was making it. And it just felt very comfortable. And I used to say that felt like the modern version of a longhouse for our family for many years, you know. It was just the way we did things. Families all intermeshed.
One thing I liked about that story before is that you, Deerheart, growing up, would wake up in a different bedroom every day.
Yeah.
And sometimes you even slept with your grandmother in the winter when she was cold and it was cold. That some of the children would get in and just keep grandma warm by snuggling against grandma.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it was still, I mean, to this day, we still all love hanging together and being together and whatnot. And I remember my friends, you know, some of this stuff from childhood doesn't really strike a point until I remember the looks on my friends' faces. You know, when you go to elementary school and people start coming over after school, and they just thought it was the coolest thing that cousins were upstairs and grandparents were downstairs and you could just run up and down. And they thought that was really cool because they wanted to do that. So that's what makes it kind of stick in my head a lot of times. Again, though, grandma, you know, grandma always played a big role. Grandma and grandpa, they always had the best stories, you know, and we'd always want to be with them. And like I said, I've worked in healthcare for years, and grandparents, I have not seen Native people in the nursing homes. So even though I look the way I do, I like to say I'm red on the inside because it's just a beautiful way to live. It's a beautiful way to exist, you know, and I find as I get older, you know, I really adapt more of those ways into my life. You think about it, Native Americans were the first and the best recyclers. So say somebody went out to hunt a deer. They killed the deer. first thing you'd see them doing is praying for that deer's life and thanking the deer for giving its life for their family. Then they would use the meat for food. They would take the skins and use it for clothing or for their weetus. They might take the bones and use it for tools or decoration or jewelry. The point was, nothing was wasted. If you had to, kill a deer, it was important to recycle and make sure you used all for respect for the deer, respect for nature. I think that if we would have adopted, again, I talked about the women's rights, if we would have adopted the kind of matriarchal thought process that the tribes had, not only would we be more advanced with women's rights, but the same thing now with the ecological crisis we're in. If we would have adopted some of those native practices of caring for Mother Earth, Indians would live in a little space, say for 100 years, and, have fires there and use the wood in the trees. And then when that space was kind of used up, they might move, a ways away and then let that place replenish itself, And so it was a matter of taking care of the earth, taking care of themselves, and living in balance with nature. Now, if we would have done that, perhaps we wouldn't be in the ecological crisis we're in, right? One of the most frustrating parts about this is I know we all got those little excerpts in school and in middle school and in elementary school and high school about Native Americans and the genocides and the smallpox blankets, and there was like all these little things and lands being taken and all these injustices, and the problem is, I get that, I know that that's the history, and there's so much more to it than what we get in those books. My mother used to always say, and I'm sure Dr. Jarvis said it, that that's history. That's exactly what it is. It's his story. It's whoever wrote that book, whoever published that, whoever collected that information. There's also her story. There's their story. There's our story. There's lots of different stories. And this is what's great about college, is now you can go past those little excerpts you got from those white man-made history books, and you can delve into all those other aspects of stories and get different perspectives and make up your own mind about what has happened. I mean, they talk about land ownership, and that was like the craziest things, and it was one of the big things when we were petitioning for federal recognition. One of the things they said was, you have to prove you've had a land base since the beginning of time. Well, we could prove you took away the land, but how are we going to prove a land base at this time? Indians didn't have a concept of land ownership. Who owns Mother Earth? They don't understand that this parcel of land is for you to stay. This parcel of land is for you to stay. Mother Earth was for everybody. So they got kind of screwed out of, bargaining for land parcels, because they didn't understand the concept of land ownership. So you try to explain that to a white body of government. Well, we can prove that you took away this land, or that we had to trade our regalia and our spoon, as they said in the movie, for, government assistance for food, since you took the best parcels of land for yourself. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. If you think about it, it makes no sense, right? Do you have anything you want to add there, Dr. J?
You've said it perfectly.
Okay. So I get all that, and I understand that, and it's sad. But I like to focus on the beautiful parts of my culture, the spirituality, the evolving of your soul. When you follow the red road, you know what I mean? You always seem to make the right decision in life. My mother always told me this one story that I loved, and I use it all the time in my life. And it talks about this gentleman who was walking down the road, and something catches his view in the part of his eye, and he's saying, looks down, and there's a cocoon that's kind of twitching on the sidewalk. And he looks really close, and it's a cocoon that's kind of twitching and moving around. So he becomes intrigued, wants to see a butterfly emerge from this. So he gets down on his hands and knees, and he sees the cocoon twitching, and he can see the wings perhaps starting to poke out. So he reaches in his back pocket, and he takes out a little switchblade. And he starts to very gently, so as not to get the wing, just cut a little line down the cocoon. So he gets to the end, and now he's starting just to peel, and he's peeling ever so gently, peeling back that cocoon. And the butterfly's wing emerged from the cocoon, and then it dies. And the reason is, it's the struggle that makes that butterfly strong. It's the struggle to come out of the cocoon that makes it beautiful. That's how I like to look at my culture. Those years of struggle with the white man, with the land stuff, with the decimation, with the wars, with the disease, has made us who we are today and the way we look at things. I think because of those experiences, we have a perspective that is unique. And I love always sharing the butterfly story, because I say there's nobody more beautiful than some of my ancestors in the way they look at things and the way they see things. I wanted to talk before I share my own story with you, because I have a story of Strawberry Moon. I wanted to give you a little history about me and Dr. Jarvis. I was going back to school to get my bachelor's degree, and there was this new pop-up school that was Bay Path down in Long Meadow. And I says, I think I'm going to go wrap up my bachelor's degree. So I went there, and a lot of women that were coming back to school after raising families and working their whole life, they were coming back. So I was really excited to go, excited to get back into school. It was great. A lot of the women I were with, it was almost like they were ripe for the picking. And what I mean by that is it was still a new program. And Vanna at the time was there, and she was looking for ideas for what we might want for classes. So I'm a little verbose, if you haven't noticed. And I remember being in a history class, and I would get on my little soapbox and talk about women's rights in the country, how they would have been more advanced. And then Vanna had a class where we were working on oral reports and getting up in front of the class. And I had done a report on Indian naming ceremonies. Now, what I love about Indian naming ceremonies is you're born and you get the same name, and unless you go to court, you're going to get your name changed legally and whatnot. You can have several names in a native community. So when I was first born, they named me White Star. The fact that I'm very light-skinned, and I was very bright as a child. So they named, my family called me White Star. As I got a little bit older, the elders decided that my big heart and my compassion for my people was a lot more a characteristic that was shining in me than perhaps White Star. So they changed my name to Deerheart. My name's been Deerheart ever since. It could change again, depending on my characteristics. My tribe named him Open Heart. He was so open in receiving of all of our stories and creating that documentary that they gifted him the name Open Heart. So you can receive different names. So I took advantage of that, that naming ceremony, and did that kind of ceremony in my class, gifting everybody in the class with an Indian name based on the characteristics I was able to witness and, they've exhibited in the classroom. And it was a great class. We had and everybody was so moved and so happy about what the names they received. They were going home and telling everybody. So I think at that time, these women that were going back to school, where I just like to think I lit a little fire into them about knowing more about Indian culture, especially living in this area, Of course, when we said to Vanna, we'd love to know more about Indian studies, all the women, who do we call? But Dr. Jarvis, who was working at the Long Meadow campus. So Dr. Jarvis comes down, and I believe that first class you taught was an Indian literature class, correct?
Right.
It was on, and so what am I thinking? What do you guys think when you're picking up a class? You say, oh my God, this is my easy A. This is going to be it for me. I'm going to be easy A. I'm going to sail through this class, easy credit, blah, blah, blah. This is what I was thinking, right? Be honest with you. This will be great. The powwow was the week before class started. It was one day, it was Saturdays. It was like a 6-hour class. The powwow was the week before. Our first assignment was to get a journal so that we could have insights onto what we were reading. So I went to one of my relatives at the powwow and I said, oh, I want a beautiful journal. So of course I picked a beautiful purple journal with a dream catcher on it. And we got into class the first day. Within minutes, I think we had a connection. We really did. He saw my journal and he came over and he picked it up and he was showing it to the class. And I explained to him that I was Native American, and it was really one of the best classes I've ever had. And I think it was because, not only because of his dynamic teaching tendencies, but in the fact that I was Native, but the class was just full of women that brought these life experiences to the class that made it such, it was not a class, it was really a spiritual journey. I swear to God it was. We had developed a book that we had worked on that year. It was just great. It was awesome. But that's how we had connected in that class. So well, it went good. The 6 weeks were coming up, and he wanted us to work on our capstone projects, our end of the year projects. So I'm still thinking at this point, this has been easy peasy. I've had all the Native American answers. I've known this was easy. And I said, I'm just going to regurgitate something I already have in my docket of things. He wasn't going to have that. He approached us each to talk, and he said to me, you know what I want for your capstone, your end project? I want your story. Because you look at you and you don't look Indian, but you have this heart that is obviously very Indian. I want your story. So now I'm thinking, oh, brother, now I have to do something, because it was going to be easy for me before this to regurgitate something, you know. Oh, brother. So I started to think about it, and I said, no, this is the right thing to do. This feels right. I got to tell my story here. And so I started to think about what I was going to do. Second right before the last capstone project, he goes, okay, I'm going to sit with each one of you, and we're going to figure out make sure everybody's going in the right direction for their final project. So he comes around, and he comes to me, and he goes, so how's it going? I says, I was going to do something easier, but you said you wanted my story. He goes, you know how you should start it? I said, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, brother, I already started it, you know. He goes, you know how you should start it? I always knew I was Indian, and my jaw dropped, and I handed him the piece of paper, and that was the first line of my story. I always knew I was Indian. How many times in your life do you get those little God moments, you know, where that say, you are exactly where you're meant to be. This is exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And my jaw dropped, and I get teary-eyed just thinking about it now, because I'm saying, this story was meant to be out there, obviously. And he already was connected enough with me to know where I was going with it and what he expected of me from it. And so I wrote my story. And when I got it back, I got an A. But I also didn't have a lot of red markings and pens, because it just flowed. Once it started coming out, it just came out. And then it was years later, he ended up, I'll let you take it from here. How's that?
Years later. This book editor for the #1 book for teaching college freshmen to write. So it was the Norton Handbook of Writing. They reached out to a lot of people and they said, we need diversity in our Norton Handbook of Writing. We're teaching tens of thousands of young college students are learning to write every year, reading great white male stuff. We want women, we want minorities, we want ethnic groups, we want races. I'm like, have I got a story for you, Mr. Norton? So I took Deerheart's story, which I had in electronic form, sent it off to them. And I'm proud to say they published her piece that you're about to hear. So that tens of thousands of young people across America are reading Strawberry Moon is the name of it. And Deerheart, I meant to bring the book, but it's over in my office and I didn't go there this early in the morning. The book, she is sandwiched between Zora Neale Hurston, Their Eyes Were Watching God, and Joan Didion, who's another big famous writer from a while back. You may not know Joan Didion, but no, it's Maya Angelou and Zora Neale Hurston and Diane Deerheart Raymond. So I was dancing in the streets that day. We were celebrating. And so the piece you're about to hear came out of a classroom where we just were on the same page. And it was a spiritual experience for me as well to work with this person. You brought so much to that class. You did most of the teaching of that class. I just asked the right questions and got out of the way. And you had things to say and it was an all women's class. I think there were about 10 of them.
Yep.
10, right?
Something like that, yeah.
So it was small, all women's class. They were ready to hear the message. And here's the message that they heard when Deerheart read her final project.
But I know he doesn't want me tooting his horn, but when you teach the native way, I'm sorry. Oh, turn it. When you teach the native way, you get the native end result. So the circle, I don't always like the test taken and just the regurgitating of information, but to lead you guys to an experience or to talk about things so that you have your own experience with it, come up with your own. It's the native way of learning, the native way of teaching. And I think it's very powerful. So let me share with you my story, Strawberry Moon. I always knew I was Indian. It was a part of who I was growing up. Attending powwows and celebrations on the reservation was commonplace. Religion was taught at home, not in a church. I am familiar with our native language, for my mother used to scold us in Algonquin so that my white dad would not know what she was saying. We had certain native customs and cultures and traditions we upheld. My favorite custom was burying the first ripe fruit from our garden, it was usually a tomato, back into Mother Earth. This allowed us to give thanks for the harvest we would receive that fall. After all, since my grandfather is the chief of the tribe and my mother its clanmother, it was inevitable that I travel a native path. One might think you cannot get much more Indian with my particular lineage. What I have come to realize is that you actually can. I like to think of myself as continuously evolving into my native skin and broadening my native path. I am very fair with green eyes. Both my siblings and I have inherited more of the physical traits of my full-blooded Swedish dad, and to be honest, we were always completely happy with them. It enabled us to mainstream comfortably into our all-white suburban school. We were Indian at home and even sometimes at school when the occasion fit. For instance, around Thanksgiving, elementary school-aged children tend to study the colonists and the Indians. It might be at this time that one of us might confess our native heritage. This caused a surge of interest, and then a request to have my mom come in and talk with the class. It was always an interesting experience watching my classmates in awe of my mother and her stories. I never quite understood the fascination until I was much older. Thanksgiving always came and went, and we resumed our average white roles in our average white schools. Adolescence quickly enveloped me, and I took a tour off my native path. I became quite disinterested in powwows and native ceremonies, for most of them are held on the weekends, and I certainly had better things to do with my time. My white friends were going to parties and shopping and hanging out, and I wanted to be with them and to be doing what they were doing. I stopped even mentioning I was native, because it always promoted a lengthy discussion that I was not always willing to have. Being native made me different from my other friends, and as a teenager, that's the last thing you want. However, this is where my knowing mother was ever so wise. She never forced my heritage down my throat. My native culture was more like an omnipotent force in the background of my life, ever present and always receptive to how much I wished to utilize it. I always knew it was there should I need it or want it. When the student is ready, a teacher appears. I was not truly ready to encompass all the richness and lessons that my heritage had to offer. Life carried on, and I found myself married and with a child at a fairly young age. I had decided to have a church wedding because my husband-to-be was Catholic. It's what all my friends were doing. It's what I thought I should do. Through it all, my mother was wonderfully supportive. She never disapproved or made me feel guilty. She just embraced all that was me. Being so young and off my true life path, my marriage began failing. It didn't happen all of a sudden. It was a gradual 7-year process. We were not only growing up with our baby, but growing apart as well. We were becoming very different. In the meantime, I had developed a new connection with my mother. I had developed a newfound respect for her. Having become a mother myself, I had a fuller understanding of her intuition and perspective. I now understood the depth of her unconditional love, for the awakenings within me with my own daughter's birth had confirmed this concept. I began to revel in the new light of motherhood and my mom as my friend and my confidant. I would discuss my marital issues with my mom. I would explain how angry I was at my husband that he didn't help me with the baby and housework, how irresponsible he was when it came to finances, how all he wanted to do was party with his friends, and how he couldn't keep a job. How our marriage counselor had said, "Never mind husband and wife. When did you two stop being friends?" I cried that all our discussions ended in a screaming match. My loving mother would just smile empathetically and stroke my hair and let me vent. Her validation of my complaints resulted her in naming my husband Screeching Hawk at the Harvest Fest one year. One day my mom asked me if I would go to the reservation and help with the Strawberry Moon festivities. She would periodically ask me to assist her with native activities, and there were times I would take her up on it, and others I wouldn't. She didn't ask me often. However, her request seemed a little different somehow. There was a sense of urgency about her, similar to the day when my daughter was born, and she convinced me with her powerful grace that my daughter's middle name should be Wanigan. Wanigan is a very positive word in our native language, meaning beautiful, welcomed one. Her utter conviction that this was meant to be this child's name ensured the incorporation of the native name on my daughter's birth certificate. Once again, this urgency I sensed within her had me convincing myself to attend our Strawberry Moon. After all, my daughter had gone with her dad to his relative's house that he had been staying with, so I had nothing better to do. We had recently separated for the 4th time. Impending divorce loomed. Besides that, it would really piss him off if I weren't home when he came to drop her off, so needless to say, that sealed the deal for me. It was an overcast day, and I was feeling melancholy at best. I picked the strawberries up from the market per Mom's request, and I met her at the reservation. She was standing at the entrance of the circle upon my arrival. She instructed me to place the strawberries in a basket, to enter the circle, and then proceed to offer everyone in the circle a strawberry, ending with her. I remembered the tradition. I had first handed out the strawberries to the members of the circle when I was 5 years old. Mom usually chooses a younger girl to pass the strawberries, and I had guessed that she was just having me do it for today for nostalgic reasons. I watched as each participant smudged and entered the circle. This purification ritual, using the smoke created from burning sage or sweetgrass, allows you to cleanse yourself of negativity. I needed to get in the proper mindset before smudging. The Strawberry Moon was the moon of forgiveness. One was not supposed to enter the circle angry or resentful. I took some deep breaths. Could I forgive my soon-to-be ex-husband for all his hatefulness, condescension, and selfishness? I was sure I could. We were making the right decision to split up. We were no longer happy. This was the best decision for all. Perhaps if we stayed together, forgiveness would be much more difficult. Choosing to break allowed us to forgive much more readily. When not faced with the viciousness of each other on a daily basis, there's room for it. I approached my relative standing at the entrance of the circle with the burning sage. From head to toe, I washed myself clean with its smoke. I cleared my mind and I allowed the smoke to encompass me wholly, to heal me. I could forgive. I entered the circle. The trees my grandfather had planted several years ago as a young buck had formed a gloriously imperfect circle for us to gather. The arbor that hosted the drum had become worn and tattered, and the drummers were sure to get wet if it were to rain. The fire beckoned from the center of the circle, awaiting the dancers that would soon surround it. Each member of the circle chose one strawberry from my basket. Each greeted me with a gentle smile or a warm embrace. The circle itself was medicinal. Everyone within it was magical. I ended with my mother's strawberry selection, which seemed to be the biggest and most vibrant one of all. My mom proceeded to the center of the circle and reminded us of the meaning behind this particular gathering. She talked about forgiveness and it being one of our greatest gifts. For anger and resentment is all-consuming, and that forgiveness is much more healing for the forgiver than the one being forgiven. She went on to tell us about the quarreling siblings and our tribal legend of the strawberry moon. I listened as members of the circle talked about their own stories of forgiveness. I witnessed them consuming their strawberries and throwing the stem of the strawberry into the fire, allowing the smoke to carry their words to the Creator. I watched heartfelt handshakes in reconciliation. Foes become friends. The force within that circle radiated, and I felt the earth vibrate. I had to shield my eyes from the sun that began to reveal itself. It cast a lonely shadow of a hawk flying above us. It was a quiet, hovering, almost pensive hawk. It circled a few times, and then it finally floated away, triumphantly, decisively. I felt my eyes begin to burn and a lump chisel away into my throat. My husband and I had chosen our separate paths, and that had brought us relief. I suddenly realized that I had actually forgiven him long ago. On some level, I had always known we were much too young to be married. I had always known, emotionally and spiritually, we did not complement each other. I had always known we could not truly nurture one another and grow together. My anger, resentment, and my own continuous mistakes throughout my marriage had stemmed from this deep-rooted knowledge. For me to bury this, to not acknowledge it fully, was concealing a part of myself. Denying my husband, and even more importantly, myself, of my true essence, doomed our relationship from the start. It caused me to egg him on, act out, behave childishly, blame him, and then feel guilty. My lack of responsibility and honesty had certainly been a major contribution in our failure as a couple. I had to take ownership for my own wayward path. I needed to be accountable for my own mistakes. My eyes cleared, and the lump in my throat melted away. Forgiving him was much simpler than what it was I needed to do. My epiphany erupted. I had to forgive myself. I shared my story with all my relations. I ate my strawberry. I placed the stem into the fire, thanking the Creator for enriching me with this clarity. My words were carried with the smoke. My spirit set forth towards healing. My mom came over and held me for a long time, grateful for my return to the native path. I left the reservation early that day, foregoing the potluck and the social that followed the ceremony. This food and gift-giving exchange is the most enjoyable part of the day's events for most participants. However, I had already received the best possible gift. My graciously intuitive mother walked me directly to the car, following the circle, knowing my direction. I was no longer interested in pissing off my future ex-husband, and I arrived home in a timely fashion to receive our daughter. The sense of peace I now emulated was contagious. My ex seemed to eventually become more affable and agreeable as well. We became and continue to be co-parents, productively and separately. I now find my native path broader with each new day. I find more and more ways to incorporate my culture's beliefs and values into my everyday life experiences. I find myself guiding my own daughter down her life's path and being present just enough so that she never wanders off her own native path. Aho, thank you. I'm sorry, I talk about my mother and I get sappy, so. So, thank you for listening. That's my personal experience. I would love to pass the talking stick around. Don't feel like you have to say anything. You do not. You can just pass it. But if you have any questions, nothing is stupid. Nothing, even if you think you're going to be embarrassed asking the question, please, this is a judge-free zone. Feel safe to ask whatever you like. If you have a comment, if you have a question, please feel free to ask. The strawberry moon. The strawberry moon is the moon of forgiveness. So when we go to the strawberry moon, we have strawberries, and you're not supposed to go with any kind of negativity or hatefulness in your heart. So I know I've seen people that have actually not participated because they didn't feel like they were in a good mindset to participate in ceremony. So when you go to ceremony, the point is to go and have a good meditative mindset, be peaceful, try to be forgiving in nature, and try to be receptive to what it is you need to hear, because you're there for a reason, you know. So the smudging gets you in that mindset, and then you go into the circle, and strawberry moon is obviously my favorite of all the moons I talked about, you know, the New Year moon, the harvest moon, they all have beautiful significance, but the strawberry moon is the moon of forgiveness, and I just think that's a life lesson that a human needs to know, never mind just Indians, you know. It's the power of forgiveness. It just sets your soul free, you know. So I felt like that day my soul was kind of set free, you know. I stopped being angry with him, you know, and I said, you know, I got to stop living right here in the problem, and I got to figure out how this is going to work. And that ceremony that day, listening to the stories, knowing my mother's presence was there, that helped. So if you look right behind you, there's some postcards of my beautiful mother. I mean, so beautiful looking. She's just been she's in postcards for pictures in museums. And a lot of times when I tell people I'm Native, they laugh at me, you know. And I say, oh, it's okay. I said, but let me show you a picture of my mother. And I show them a picture of my mother, and then I show them my father, you know. But I think it's given me a unique perspective in life, because I can speak of, you know, white people injustices because I'm half white. My dad was white, you know, and I can understand the Native perspective because my mom was Native. So I think sometimes that gives me an advantage because I have both, you know, I walk the white road and I walk the red road, you know, and I can see that. But, you know, like I said, I grew up in an all-white school, so it was easy to kind of blend in. Nobody knew I was Native. But when I'm on Native ceremonies and I'm doing that stuff, I would look at my mother. She's beautiful. I'd love to look more like her. She's beautiful, you know. And I used to tease her. I said, you couldn't have married an Indian guy so I'd have a better tan for, and she would just, laugh because she did. She liked the tall, blonde, white Vikings. Who knows, so, but absolutely. I've used it for my advantage. And yes, I've also been, kind of condescended to because I do this because I love it and because I adore him and because I like to share with you guys because it's a good thing. Teachable moment, right?
Let's give Deerheart a nice warm.